What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Alolan DataDex with me, TheOneIntegral, and today we're going to be covering the final evolution of the water starter Poplio from Generation 7, of course that is Primarina. Before we get started however, do remember that we have a vote going on for the Pokemon 4 Episode 4, and that is going to be one of Lycanroc's forms, either midday or midnight, so if you haven't already, pop down in the comment section and say midday or midnight, or if you have in the previous episodes, do it again, because it counts I suppose. So let's then jump in and have a look at Primarina. It's number 730 in the National Pokédex and is the first Water Fairy starter Pokemon, or final starter Pokemon. Not first Water Fairy because obviously we have Azumarill, but apart from that it is the soloist Pokemon. In terms of dimensions, it stands at 5 foot 11 inches, or sort of like sits, I don't know, 5 foot 11 inches or 1.8 meters, and weighs 97 pounds or 44 kilograms. In terms of breeding in egg groups, it's in the Water 1 and the Field egg groups, and in terms of gender split, it's same as all the starters we've seen before, 87.5% male, 12.5% female, so if you do want a female Poplio, you're going to have to reset a few times. Looking at its evolution chain, you can see like the rest of the starters for Generation 7, Poplio level 17 to Brionne, and then Brionne level 34 to Primarina. Fairly simple. Then at the base stats, if we have a look here, you can see Primarina boasts the highest base stat out of all the starters this generation, sort of the highest single one, and that is special attack at 126. It's pretty high. The next closest I think is Incineroar at 115 for physical attack. So Primarina is the closest you're going to get to a all-out attacker I suppose for these three starters. Moving further down, we have Special Defense at 116, and then further down again, Attack and Defense at 74, and Speed at 60. Like the rest of the starters, it's fairly slow, but it has a very clear, it's a special attacker, it's not a physical attacker, because its physical attack is 74, and its physical defense is pretty low as well, so you do have to watch out for that. But in terms of special stats, it's pretty high there, so that's a bonus for Primarina. Looking then at its abilities, obviously it gets Torrent like the rest of the water starter Pokemon, but its hidden ability, which is not available yet of course, it might be available in the future, you'll have to check at the time you're watching this video, but its hidden ability is Liquid Voice, which is actually quite an interesting new ability. It turns all sound-based moves into water-type moves, and obviously when we get to looking at its moves in a bit, we'll talk about how you could use that in the future, but it's a very interesting one, so we'll look at it in a minute. So before we look at moves and competitive sets, of course we look at the typing for Primarina, and being a Water Fairy, I'd say it's a decent type. Looking at the resistances, it has 6 here, which are Fire, Water, Fighting, Bug, Ice and Dark. Some decent resistances there. It has only 3 weaknesses, which are Grass, Electric and Poison, so it's not like you have any 4 times weaknesses or anything, it's just the 3 there. It is immune to the Dragon type, remember though, because of its part Fairy typing, which is pretty cool, so you can switch it on an Outrage for example, and also it takes neutral from the other 8 types there, which are Normal, Flying, Rock, Ground, Ghost, Psychic, Steel and Fairy. So I'd say it's an overall a decent typing. It's not an amazing typing, but it's pretty decent still. Only those 3 weaknesses, Grass, Electric, Poison. Of course they are reasonably common types, but it's nothing you're going to be really struggling with, because you can't switch in on a certain type of move. You can switch in as long as you don't, you're not going to take it badly, because you have a pretty high special defense. In terms of physical defense, that's just something you want to watch out for when you do switch in. Looking then at the moves that Primarina can learn, the first one it learns on evolution, whatever level it evolves at from a Brionne, and that is Sparkling Aria, and it is its signature move. Now what this does is it showers the whole battlefield in water, it's base 90 damage, and if it hits any Pokemon that has a burn, it heals the burn as well. So it could be very useful in terms of VGC or doubles, because you can heal your ally's burn if it does get burnt. And in terms of enemy Pokemon, generally you don't want to be healing them, because if they've got a burn it means that it's reducing their physical attack, and it's pretty good for you. But in some cases you might want to, in case if it's got a burn orb for example, to activate an ability. Of course if you heal the burn, then of course it's not going to activate that ability, but generally the only one you'd use that for would be Guts, and I think Toxic is, Toxic Orbs are used more often than Burn Orbs, so you would struggle to get some decent use out of it, especially in a singles environment. And of course there are better water type moves for Primarina to learn out there. But we'll move on next to the level up moves, the first one being Hyper Voice at level 38. This is one of the moves that will be affected by Liquid Voice if and when it is released. It's base 90 damage, so of course it's a base 90 water type move technically if you have Liquid Voice, so it's decent. Generally if you've got Torrent you don't want to run Hyper Voice, you've got better moves out there, but it's a possibility if you have Liquid Voice. Another level up move we have level 44 Moonblast. Of course this is just basically your fairy type move, your part fairy, you get stab on it. Moonblast is pretty decent damage, 95 base power, it can do decent damage, it's a general good move for it. Then at level 55 we have Hydro Pump. Now I mentioned better water type moves instead of Sparkling Area. This is one of them. Base 110 power. Hydro Pump is pretty damn powerful. However, you might want to think about using another water type move rather than this, because of course Hydro Pump has less PP and only has 80% accuracy, so of course it is a trade-off power for accuracy, so we'll talk more about that later on. Then we have one final level move, and that's at level 60. It learns Misty Terrain. Now, Misty Terrain was not a huge thing back in Generation 6. It might not necessarily be a huge thing in terms of Generation 7, apart from the Guardian Pokemon with their abilities, but it could, could be a good one, for you to set it up if you are thinking of going for like a defensive set. Misty Terrain will prevent you from getting poisoned, prevent you from getting confused now, so there are a few benefits to it. And of course, it boosts Fairy type moves, so your Moonblast is going to be powered up there, so it's certainly a possibility to think about using. Moving on to the TMs, first up we have TM13 Ice Beam, which is a nice powerful ice type move. It's just coverage really in terms of your weaknesses. You are weak to the grass type, so you might want to have an Ice Beam to deal with any grass types that switch on you. That's one possibility there. Then at TM16 we actually have Light Screen. Now I'll talk more about this when we get to the sets, but Light Screen is a possibility to run. In terms of what it does, it boosts your special defense, for 5, well not necessarily your special defense, but your team's special defense for 5 turns, so it reduces the power of special moves basically. Then we have TM29 Psychic, again a possibility to run on your special attacker, as it was always. You are weak to poison type moves, so it is an idea maybe to run a psychic psychic move, or just psychic in general, to deal with any poison types that switch in. Then right after that we have TM30 Shadow Ball. Again, it's a possibility to run, only 80 base power this time. It won't give you coverage against what you necessarily need, but it could be an option to run. Then we have TM53 Energy Ball. Now of course this isn't necessarily a move you'd have to use, because of course it's just Energy Ball, it's a grass type move, base power 90, it's pretty tight, but in terms of what you're weak to, it's not going to help you out there. You do resist, you resist water, but of course you don't really need to worry about the water types, so it might be an option to run, but generally I wouldn't see this run too much, just another option there. Moving further on to another page of news, we have, of course, TM55 Scold. This is definitely another option instead of Hydro Pump, base power of 80, and the chance to burn, a pretty decent chance to burn as well. So it is a pretty powerful move to think about running. And we follow that out with TM94 Surf, of course Surf now a TM, and of course it's base power 90, so slightly more powerful than Scold, but it doesn't have the chance to burn, so it's really a toss-up between what you want, a bit more power, but not the chance to burn. It depends whether you're looking to use Primarina against physical attackers or against special attackers. Now the trouble is, you have less of a physical defense, so it could be an idea to say, I'm going to run Skull because then I need the burn to be able to survive moves. Whereas you could say, well, I'm not going to worry about physical attackers at all. If I see one, I'm just going to switch out. I'll use Surf for more damage. One final TM here is TM99 Dazzling Gleam. Now this is another fairy type move option, especially for doubles, so of course if you're using that double environment with Sparkling Area, you want to think about maybe running Dazzling Gleam. Not as powerful as Moonblast of course, but it does hit the entire other half of the field. 2 egg moves we have here. The first of these is Amnesia. Now this is not so a common move you'd see, but it could be one you think about running on a Primarina, and it sharply increases your special defense when used. And the next one is another sort of unused move, and that's Aqua Ring. So you could use Aqua Ring to get some generic health point restoration every turn. It could be used in some sets, as we'll see right now actually, because we're going to move on to the competitive sets for, Primarina. We're going to have one offensive one, and then one sort of more defensive one, more bulky one. Starting off with offensive, we have in terms of moveset, Scold, Moonblast, Ice Beam, and then Psychic or Hyper Voice. Ability is Liquid Voice if you have it, if not Torrent. Nature here is a modest one. Held item can be leftovers, sure, can be choice specs if you're going for more of a pure power, or you can even go for an Assault Vest to go sort of 50-50. EV wise, we're going to have maximum special attacks to get all the damage there, 236 in health points just to give us some decent bulk, and then 22 in speed just to give you a trickling of good speed there. So what do we have? We have Scold first up, which of course is a decent move I suppose. You could switch that out for Hydro Pump if you really wanted, or even Surf, but Scold is here to deal with these physical attackers and try and get the burns off. Moonblast obviously is then your Fairy Stab, so that's pretty standard. Ice Beam is coverage for grass types, and then finally Psychic or Hyper Voice. If you have Liquid Voice, obviously Hyper Voice will be a water type move. You could even think about switching Scold out for it, but I think generally Hyper Voice isn't going to be a huge factor, especially since the hidden ability is not out there at the moment, so you can't even use it, so Psychic will be a good one there. As I mentioned, you could put Shadow Ball in there, or you could even put, what's the other one? Energy Ball in, another ball move, to just give you a bit more coverage in general. Then in terms of ability, as I mentioned, Liquid Voice if you have it, because generally Torrent is not a useful ability. And then Nature is a modest one, which increases our special attack, lowers our physical attack. We're not going to be a fast Pokemon, so Timid is really a useless ability here, or not the perfect ability. So Modest, really, to give us the most power we can, is the best choice. Held Item is sort of a different choice there entirely. Leftovers is just to give you, your end of turn health point restoration, let you last over time. Choice specs if you want to switch in and just do damage, just power off, so switch in and just scold, Moonblast, etc. Of course you have to think about the choice of that. And then finally Assault Vest is another option, as I mentioned. It's sort of 50-50, so you can be offensive, but also you have some decent bulk, especially in special defense, which is already a good defense for you, just to power you up and let you survive on the field a bit longer at least. EVs, as I mentioned, maximum special attack, and then mostly health points, and then trickling in speed just to give you a bit more speed to outspeed those slower ones that would not necessarily put anything in speed, but would put it all in the attack and might be a threat to you. How would you want to use this set? Well, it depends on how item you have really. If it's leftovers, you can just come in and throw attacks out here and there, and then maybe switch out if you get in a bit of trouble. If it's choice specs, of course, it's switch in, use an attack, and then switch out of what depending on the situation, of course. And an Assault Vest is more of, again, similar to leftovers, I suppose. It's the fact that you haven't got any health point restoration, so you have to be a bit more thoughtful about how you go about it. You lose some health points, that's basically it, unless you have other health point restoration on your team. So generally, it's a basic set. It's nothing too tricky to it. So if we then move on to the second set for Primarina, as I mentioned, it's more of a bulky set and more of a just sort of about surviving attacks, I suppose. Looking at it, we have a moveset. We have Aqua Ring, Amnesia or Light Screen, Moonblast or Reflect, and then Scold. Ability is Torrent, Nature is Bold or Calm, held item is Leftovers or Light Clay, and then the EVs we have maximum health points, maximum defense, and then the rest in speed, just to throw a few in there. So what's this set all about? Well, looking at the moves first, we have Aqua Ring. Aqua Ring combined with Leftovers as our held item will give us a double health point restoration at the end of a turn, if of course you can set Aqua Ring up, which will be quite good, because then if you then move on and set up a Light Screen or use Amnesia to increase your special defense, any special attacker is going to be completely walled by you because they won't do much damage, and of course then you can restore up at the end of the turn. We have also Reflect as another option instead of Moonblast, and Light Screen instead of Amnesia. These are depending on how you want to play this. Do you want to go for Amnesia and just increase your own special defense and bulk yourself up? Of course that allows you to go +2, +4, +6, whereas Light Screen just basically allows you to go to +2, and it's for the whole team though, so the other option there. And of course, as I mentioned, Reflect is there instead of Moonblast if you want to deal with physical attackers a bit more. Because as I mentioned a few times, your physical defense is not as good as your special defense, so it could be abused in that sense, hence why you might want to have Reflect. But that's also where we have Scold, because then if a physical attack does come out, if we use Scold, hopefully get the burn off, that means you can successfully stay here and wall them as well. And if you have Reflect, this gives you another option. You either have Moonblast for more coverage and more damage, or you go for Reflect and sort of completely wall out any opponent if of course you can set the right things up. We have Torrent as our ability purely because we have no sound-based moves, so there's no point in running Liquid Voice. There's no point in there at all. Nature is Bold or Calm. Now this is up to you. Bold will increase your physical defense and lower your physical attack. That's good, I suppose, because we already have a pretty decent special defense, so we're sort of bringing the physical defense up to par so we can survive some moves. Or you could use Calm, which will increase your special defense and lower your physical attack, which means you're completely specially dependent, so if a physical attacker does come in, they're going to have a very easy time with you. Held item, as I mentioned, Leftovers works well with Aqua Ring, but Light Clay is another option. If you're going for both those screens, you could use Primarina to set up some screens. So you can come in, you can use Light Screen, Reflect, depending on what attacker is out in the field, and then you can switch out, and Light Clay will make those screens last longer. Now whether or not that's a viable strategy, a viable way of doing it, because it's more playing for the team rather than playing for Primarina, it's up to you. Of course you have no health point restoration apart from Aqua Ring if you're going to set that up, so you might want to think about having a Wisher on the team. Maybe if your Primarina is down at half health points, you can wish them in, and then they'll get full health points and enough to set up the screens once more. And then EVs, maximum health points and defense to give us sort of the maximum physical defense we can and maximum bulk we can. You could put maximum special defense if you really wanted to, but I think our special defense is high enough to begin with. You really want to bring that physical defense up to par, so you have something, you have something to equal against, so you're not sort of all in one, and then if a physical attack comes in, you'd be completely screwed. How do you want to run the set? I've mentioned it sort of as we go along, but if you're using the screens with Light Clay, obviously you want to set the screens up and then switch out, or if you are in a good position to, you could stay in. Depends on what you're going for there with the rest of your team. If you have screens, you could then say, I'm going to switch out into this Pokemon that isn't necessarily bulky, but with the screens can survive some attacks and set up in that way. Or you could say, I'm going to stay in with the screens and I'm going to make the most use out of, set up an Aqua Ring, which means I have double health point restoration, which means I can last longer overall, because obviously you set up Aqua Ring on your first turn of battle, yeah, that's good, but you'll then take an attack already. So you want to have the option to set up Aqua Ring in those situations where you can. So you could also run, instead of Scald in the last slot, Moonblast if you're purely going for special defense Pokemon or special attacking Pokemon rather than physical ones, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would say at least deal with physical attackers, don't just ignore them and say I'm going to be a special wall, because eventually that'll come around and it'll bite you in the butt. But that is going to be it for this episode, and that's it for Primarina in general, just the 2 sets, nothing too special. As I mentioned in previous episodes though, as the competitive scene sort of builds up for Sun and Moon, we'll see different sets come in and see how viable these things are. But do let me know what you think about this down below, and of course don't forget to vote for next episode's Pokemon, either Lycanroc midday or Lycanroc midnight, so say midday or midnight down in the comment section now. But for now, this is going to be it for me for today, so I shall see you next time. Thank you for watching, goodbye my friends.